The Hyperion record label has just added another jewel to its catalog. On August the 29th, it released a remarkable new recording from celebrated harpsichordist Mahan Esfahani. Featuring the first book of Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier, the album continues Esfahani's ambitious project to record the composer's complete works for harpsichord. This is the eighth Bach disc Esfahani has recorded with Hyperion, part of a long-term undertaking that showcases his singular artistry and deep affinity with Bach. Since his London debut in 2009, the Iranian-American musician has carved out a reputation as one of classical music's boldest figures, moving seamlessly from Baroque repertoire to adventurous contemporary commissions. Along the way, he has earned international recognition, including BBC New Generation Artist Awards, the Royal Philharmonic Society Award, and accolades from Gramophone magazine. For Winnipeg audiences, the recording offers just a preview of what's to come. On March 11th, 2026, Esfahani will appear with our Manitoba Chamber Orchestra performing both a newly composed harpsichord concerto by Julian Grant and one of Bach's keyboard concertos. Esfahani's new take on the Well-Tempered Clavier is a dazzling addition to this discography and one of today's most fearless musicians. And joining me here over Zoom, it's my great pleasure to chat with Mahan Esfahani. Hi, Mahan. Nice to meet you here over Zoom.
Yeah, nice to meet, and I look forward to meeting you in person, of course, in the spring. Oh,
Mm-hmm. So, a big congratulations on this latest disc. It is really terrific. I thought I would start the conversation out by asking, can you talk about your love of Bach and when you first discovered him? Was it right around the same time that you discovered the harpsichord?
so yes, I guess it was. I grew up with a lot of classical music. My father had a lot of records, and but he liked mostly romantic music, a lot of Beethoven, a lot of opera, stuff like that. And I remember hearing Bach for the first time on our, local NPR station, and I had never heard anything like it. It seemed something so wholly different from the here and now. And yet it
Mm.
wasn't escapist. It sort of commanded that I sort of listen to it more. Anyway, I remember that summer I went, my parents sort of got me out of the house and I went and stayed with an aunt, and we were living in Maryland, and I went to West Virginia for the summer to stay with my aunt and, sort of play with my cousins and, go to the pool and that sort of thing. And my aunt took us to the record store to buy us sort of cassette tapes and that sort of thing. And I asked for this cassette tape of sort of works by Bach, and it was a sort of compilation cassette, a track here and a track there. And there was the third movement of the third Brandenburg Concerto, and
Mm.
I got absolutely obsessed with this recording. I remember back
Declamation.
then, you with pencil, you would put a pencil and you would loop it back to go. So I would listen to this movement, and then I would take the cassette out and use my pencil and turn it back. And all I listened to that summer was this one movement of the Third Brandenburg Concerto. And I thought, whatever this is, I think I need to spend my life with this. I have no idea what this, there was no plans to become a musician. There was certainly not professional musicians in the family. And I thought, whatever this is what I'm going to do. And then I got another cassette from an uncle of Bach harpsichord concertos. And I thought, what on earth is this instrument? Whatever this is, I got to spend time with this. So,
Mm.
it was that sort of being grabbed, sort of viscerally. And I think that's what Bach has always done for me and continues to do for me, is that for
Yeah.
me, it's a very physical response.
Mm. And then, like, you went on to study with one of the great Bach interpreters in the world, Zuzana Ruchikova. You studied with her. She recorded all of Bach's works for harpsichord. After your studies with her, did you look at Bach's music differently? And can you talk about studying with her and the effect on the interpretation of Bach that she had on you?
So Rujishkova was this amazing person. Before I went to her, I studied with a really, really great Australian harpsichordist in the United States named Peter Watchorn, who I think was the first person to really open my eyes to like what the harpsichord could be, what it could say, and especially Bach. And I always admired Ruzhikova's recordings. I mean, who didn't? She was this great global phenomenon. And I lived in London. I had to work, right? So I was a musician. But, I always wish I could have gone back and studied more, but I just couldn't, I couldn't afford to basically stop working and study. And I never went to music college, so I didn't have those means. And at some point, I just thought, to hell with it. I'm going to try to study with Ruzhikova, go to Prague like once every couple months and just have a few days of lessons. First of all, it took me about a year and a half to convince her to give me lessons because she was already in her late 80s at that point. And she said, I'm not teaching anymore. And then she said, okay, I'll give you one lesson. I thought, okay, great. So I took to her the B flat minor prelude and fugue of the Well-Tempered Clavier, book one.
Hmm.
And we start the fugue, and she says, "What are you doing?" And I play it sort of very quietly and sort of very reflective. She said, "This is a great Greek tragedy. You should play it like a great tragedy." And I said, "Yes, but have you considered Oedipus at Colonus?" And she sort of looked at me and she thought, you can come back. And so I worked with her for 7 years, and it
Mm,
was this great discursive style of teaching where everything was a question and the answer to every question was a question.
mm,
And I call it this sort of Talmudic style of teaching. And I think what I learned from her is that if you ever think you have the answer, you haven't tried hard enough. And I guess the reason why I'm still playing is because I'm still asking these questions and I have no answers.
mhm. When I was in university, we studied the Well-Tempered Clavier Book One. It's how we learned about our fugal writing. We went through all the fugues from Book One, studied the subject, the counter subject, the episode, yada yada yada. For you, when you're interpreting the preludes and fugues, are you thinking about those individual melodic lines, or for you, is it something more emotional that you're trying to get across on the harpsichord, more from the heart?
I think you've posed a question in a very provocative way. I think that the underpinning of the question is faulty, because I don't think it's one or the other, right? Like I think Bach
Mm,
is actually posing to us that science made the well-tempered scale, and
mm,
it's what makes this expressive, right? Like they're not separate things. Bach doesn't write in counterpoint or polyphony like because it's has mathematical probity. No, he writes because he's fluent in that language, right?
mm.
Like, a language that's difficult. I don't know, like Hungarian is supposedly very, very difficult. I've never studied it. I have no intention to. But like, just because it's difficult and has a lot of rules, it doesn't mean that Hungarian can't be expressive, right? Like Hungarian, clearly, like people are falling in love who speak Hungarian. Probably people are having
Yeah.
children. So like, clearly there's some expression there. And I would say that, it's the whole idea of fugue as this inherently academic form for which one turns off one's expressive faculties, I think and I'm not saying that you're doing this, by the way. I just want to make that
Mhm.
clear. But I think it's a greatly poisonous trend in Bach interpretation. And I think there's a school of Bach playing at the piano, but also at the harpsichord, um, which is based on the idea that whatever this is, even if you don't like it, it's good for you.
Mm,
It's highly fibrous. Like it's good for it has antioxidants. And it saddens me that we continue with this style of Bach playing because I think it doesn't answer the ultimate, sort of challenge of Bach, which is that actually this is all about maximum expressivity and what you termed as emotional, which is a perfectly fine term. I would go deeper than that. I would say that it is posing ideas that are too deep for words,
mm.
right? Like we wouldn't have music if we could verbalize everything.
Right.
And ultimately, you know, music and the sort of rules underpinning music, I don't like to call them the rules, the sort of structural elements of what underpins music have been developed by people who wanted to be expressive. The moment that we divorce that from, I'm very influenced by opera because I love the opera and I go to the opera. Like the moment that we divorce music from like stagecraft and from theater and from drama is the point at which I sort of lose interest in music, I would say. and so I think it's maybe more helpful to look at it, in a slightly different way.
So I guess sort of rounding, as a Canadian kid, I grew up on a steady diet of Glenn Gould
Yeah,
on radio,
yeah, yeah.
and so
But people in Canada know that Glenn Gould died like over 40 years ago, right? Like
yes,
they're
but
okay.
he,
I just want to clarify that
yeah, he's
he's
still being
like,
played
yeah,
here.
yeah, okay.
Uh, what do you think of his recordings? Like they
They're
were so
they're
very
fine. I mean,
later.
he's one of many Bach interpreters.
Mm,
The idea that it's the end all and be all, I don't get. Like, I guess that maybe that's like a national pride thing, and I think that's great. But like for me, Sviatoslav Richter, Samuel Feinberg, Nikolaeva, Maria Udina. I mean, all these great Russian players. You have God Brendel did one
mm,
Bach album, and it is amazing. That is,
mm.
I'm not like the biggest Brendel fan. That is a good album. God, that is a good album. There's Edwin Fischer. Obviously at the harpsichord we had Wanda Landowska. We had Ralph Kirkpatrick. We had Gustav Leonhardt, who, in a funny way, I don't think that Bach was actually his strongest suit as a solo
Hmm.
player. He was a great conductor of Bach's music, Ton Kopman. Um, but what would Bach have made of the idea that in order to sort of gain entrance into the hallways of Bach, that you only had to acknowledge one performer? I don't know what he would have made of that. Um, I have been taken to task for sort of not lighting the fire at that temple, and that's fine.
One of the other things that I find really interesting is you think of the first book of Well-Tempered Clavier as one big, large structure.
I do,
So,
certainly.
yeah, so a couple things. Can you talk about why you repeat the C major prelude at the end? And are there any preludes and fugues that you think as structural sections to the larger work? I think of architecture and just sort of,
That's a fantastic question. Well, oh, you froze.
oh
Uh-oh,
no,
that ain't good.
you're frozen too.
Hello?
Oh, there you are.
Okay, okay, let's start again. Let's start again. I got your question. I'll just say that is
Yeah.
a really great question. Um, well, look, to start again with the C major prelude, probably there was an element of, with the Goldberg variations, you go back to the original theme, but also because I contend that the most of the preludes of the first book, in fact, I might even go so far as to say all of the preludes of the first book, in their way, are variations on the first prelude. And so when
Mm.
you come back to the first prelude, you see what the sort of structural underpinnings of that, what that inspired, first of all. But also, I mean, look, another great work of Bach's that I still haven't recorded yet, but is very meaningful to me, is the Art of Fugue, Kunst der Fuge. And I love Art of Fugue, and I'm playing it again this season. And you know, there was a argument made by Anatoly Milka, who is this Russian musicologist, that Art of Fugue is actually one big meta fugue, because there's ideas like a subsidiary idea in one fugue that only comes back like 10 fugues later. And that's a provocative idea. I sort of get a kick out of that way of thinking. Whether these are sort of discrete works or not. I would say occasionally there are motives that I wonder whether they're shared between fugues and preludes. Um, but the argument that that makes it a meta work, you know, I have yet to see whether that's convincing. I think that to see it as one work on my part, it achieves two things. One is that then you hear that this one method of tuning can be heard in all the different colors, and it can have maximum expressivity in all the keys, which is what Bach says on the what is it, on the title page, right? That's
Mm.
number one. Number two is that we hear that large structures in the 18th century or 17th century are fundamentally theatrical. And, 18th century stagecraft is something that I just find really interesting. And I mean, ultimately, I think that for the instrument to be expressive, as I contend that it is, the harpsichord is an expressive instrument. It has to relate to the human voice, right?
Mm.
it and the voice is the basis for all expressivity, and 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 there's a reason why the harpsichord was used well into the 19th century to train singers. There's a reason why the harpsichord always had a place in the opera house, because it is a fundamentally vocal instrument. It's not in spite of the harpsichord that vocality happens. It's because of the harpsichord that vocality happens.
Hmm. Oh, it's been so great to talk to you.
Oh, for me too.
I'm going to wrap up the conversation quickly by asking, you're going to be here in March with the MCO. You've got this concerto written by Julian Grant. Have you seen it, and what's it like? And if
Oh,
you
it's
have seen
fabulous.
it.
Actually, I have to text Julian tonight to ask him a couple things. But no, I'm feeling pretty hunky dory about this piece. Julian Grant, of course, also a great opera composer. Many people will know his works for the stage, but he's written quite a challenging work for the harpsichord. And I think that what I appreciate about him is that, like Bach or any composer, he is always discovering new colors. And I think it'll be a very colorful evening. And I think it will be a nice partner to the Bach concerto on the program. I'm very much looking forward, because I've never been to Winnipeg. So
Hmm.
the only thing I know about my only experience of Winnipeg is that great episode of The Office where Michael goes to Winnipeg. And I love that episode. So I'm really looking forward to visiting that hotel and, meeting the concierge and all that.
And
So.
hopefully the weather plays in your favor in March. March can still be touch and go.
Hey, you're talking to a guy who lives in Eastern Europe. I know all about it, so I'll be well dressed for it.
Mahan, this has been just fantastic to talk to you today. We here in Winnipeg are super excited to hear with our MCO on March 11, 2026. A big congratulations on this truly remarkable recording, and thanks so much for sitting down and chatting with me today. It's been great.
Thank you very much. And if any people are upset about what I said about Glenn Gould, they can forward angry mail to your station. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.